When they said Parkinson's, it felt like my entire history got erased. Not just the tremors, but the person I used to be. Parkinson's tried to erase who I am. If you're fighting to keep your soul intact after that diagnosis, especially if Camp Lejeune is part of your story, don't click away. This is the hidden war no one talks about. When you received your Parkinson's diagnosis, did it feel like your entire history was being erased? The hardest part isn't the tremor itself, it's the mental friction of mourning the person you used to be. While your body starts feeling like an unreliable teenager, at the same time, it's a stranger to you. You don't even know who you are by then. See, a diagnosis can try to rewrite your autobiography, but it doesn't get to hold the pen, that is for sure. A medical diagnosis tries so hard to overwrite your life story, but your legacy as a Marine, as a father, husband, brother, those years, the life you built, yeah, that deserves more than to be buried under a sand story written many times before. You're a person fighting to keep your soul intact while everything feels like it's shifting under your feet. Yes, they gave you a label, but you still have a name. Today, we're talking about how to win that battle and reclaim who you truly are. So, welcome to Parkinson's Today. I'm your host, Bryan Burden, and we're going to start off with the identity conflict, the things that happen to you mentally when you first get the Parkinson's disease and they tell you that you have it. Truly, the diagnosis tries to kind of overwrite your life story. That's the way it felt to me, and it reduces decades of who I really was into one clinical word now. It was already bad enough that I was struggling with the mental side of things and that the physical aspect was starting to take its toll, and that became my whole story. Now the whole story becomes a word, Parkinson's. Your pre-diagnosis roles suddenly feel threatened. The strong one, the provider, the Marine, the reliable person who could always handle it, all comes into question by this when you start to get these diagnoses. Many people describe watching their old self slowly disappear in the mirror and in daily life. I remember I even wrote about it in one of my songs that I didn't recognize the person I saw in the mirror. And this was long before I ever just knew that I had Parkinson's. Now, I look at it this way. It's not just a disease showing up. It's a stranger moving into the house of who you used to be. Isn't that what it is? This is real grief. You're mourning the person you used to be while still having to show up every day as the far lesser new version of yourself. And you feel much weaker and you feel like things have changed so much you can't be the same person you were. Now, this can fall heavy for Camp Lejeune veterans like myself because the water already stole years of health, trust, and peace of mind. I just didn't know that it was happening and that it had done that. The Parkinson's label can feel like the final erasure, as if the story of your service and your life is being buried under a medical stamp. Let's say of the many, the water already took years from us. The diagnosis doesn't get to take our identity too. That's what I think is what we are trying to talk about here when we talk about the mental side. We still are the same person inside, right? But things have changed on the outside. So where does that internal friction come from then? When do we start to have those problems? Well, the hardest part isn't the physical tremors themselves, and they're tough. The stiffness, the fatigue, the pain, the always feeling like you're tired at any given moment. One time you're hot, then you're cold, then you're hot again. You can't get anywhere in between, it seems like. There's all kinds of different small factors going on. Maybe you're struggling with trying to swallow, and that's a struggle for you. See how it is even a trouble to get some of the words out. You lose your train right in the middle of a sentence and can't remember the next word. You see what I'm talking about? That's how it works. The body becomes a house you no longer fully recognize, but you're still alive inside it. Now, Worth gets quietly tied to what you can still do, that is for sure, and every new limitation feels like another piece of identity slipping away. For me, standing becomes problems. The longer I stand, the sore and the more pain and the more influence of what it takes out on my body comes into it, and it comes very quickly as it does. So that changes a lot of the things that I used to do. I'm a pastor at a church. It's not easy to stand for that 35, 45 minutes and talk now. I have to sit down if I'm going to be the one who's giving the sermon that day. These are changes and small ones that happen so quickly sometimes it takes over your entire person that you are. There's a quiet fear that family, friends, and even doctors now only see the diagnosis instead of the full person that I am. Medical appointments almost never address the psychological battle that we go through. They focus on the meds, the symptoms, and the numbers. They don't look at the psychological portion of it. Now, I do have a doctor for that, and I hope you do too if you're going through this same thing so that you can get through these psychological problems. Logically, it is no surprise that doctors treat the symptoms, but you have to fight for your own soul. That is the way it goes. And the soul is as your mind and your thought process as it goes through this. Now, they give it a disorder. Mine is mood adjustment disorder. I changed the letters around, right? That's what I call it. Mood adjustment disorder is mad, right? But it's actually a disorder where your mood's adjusting all the time based on what you're going through. And the VA has that in my records already as something that I'm having problems with. And that was before we even found out I had Parkinson's. Through all of this minefield, maintaining a coherent sense of self, a clear, this is still me, is one of the most important parts of adjusting and staying grounded through this entire process. Well, what about reclaiming who you are through this? And then this is going to be hard. You're never going to be the same person you were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And it's not just aging. Your body has basically started to attack you, is what it has started to do. And how are you going to get through that minefield that you find? First and most important, separate the disease from the self that you are, and you will find a way to live with it and not let it run over you with pain, shame, and endless rabbit holes that you dive down into at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get through the process. I think by changing your mindset, instead, this is what you should say. I have Parkinson's. Parkinson's does not have me. This is a great start, but only the start of where you're headed. You will need to protect and tell your own legacy on your terms. Your service, your Camp Lejeune years, your life before and after, so the diagnosis doesn't become, the only story people hear. And man, do I feel like that is all we talk about. Everyone who knows me, they ask how I'm doing on that day. They want to know how everything's going. And I understand that definitely for sure. But sometimes that's the only thing that guides us through the process. It's not just, yeah, I'm doing okay, or things are good. We kind of pull that mask up and try to tell people that things are good when they're not. You got to ask yourself what still matters deeply. Is it loyalty that you're trying to do, that you talk like this? Maybe it's humor. Maybe you crack jokes about it. Maybe you're protecting your family from what they might have to go through. Maybe the curiosity you don't want to really listen to, so you get that mask up. But advocacy, faith, and grit are still in there and are inside you. They deliberately double down on those things is what this does when it starts to hit your psyche. Ask yourself what still matters deeply. Is it loyalty? Is it humor? Is it protecting your family? When the body changes, the values will become the new foundation of your new self. How about creating small daily anchors for your life to help yourself, like routines, creative outlets, conversations, or quiet moments that remind you of the continuous thread of who you are? For me, I got into doing some music. My son said, hey, why don't you start writing things down? Matter of fact, he said, why don't you make some songs out of it? And that has given me some solace and some feeling that God is still with me as I write some songs and I go through music and I write down things of what I think on a daily basis. Maybe you should seek out a connection with other veterans or people living with Parkinson's who refuse to shrink into the patient role that we all seem to get into. Now, refuse to let the medical label author the rest of your life story. You still get to write the next chapters of what's left. So don't forget that. You don't have to become the diagnosis. Instead, you can become the resistance. All right, in closing, so you are already in this hidden war for your self-perception, whether you choose it or not, right? You're in it now. The diagnosis arrived like an invasion. Reclaiming yourself is now the counterattack. This is what you're going to have to get to. I got to get back to where I was before. I know not physically, but mentally I can get back to where I was before. The diagnosis does not get the last word in this. Your history, your service, the person you've been for decades, and the person you are still becoming, those belong to you. This isn't about pretending nothing changed or forcing fake positivity. It's about refusing to let the change erase the core of who you are. You, my friends, are not the story they wrote about you. You are the story you keep writing. I'm sorry. If this hit home, drop a comment and tell me what part of your identity you're fighting hardest to keep. And if you know another veteran or someone living with Parkinson's who needs to hear this, share it with them. You're not alone in this fight. We keep going together.